But we'll move on to our next speaker, Patrick Beldio, and his paper is called Ecological Crisis, Fueling a New Creation, Mirra Alfassa's Ecospiritual Vision. A little bit about Patrick. He is a scholar of comparative religion and theology with a focus on Hindu Christian studies, the integral yoga of the Sri Aurobindo ashram, Meher Baba, and the Chisti Sufi lineage in the West, and Franciscan spirituality with sub-interests in art, gender, and sustainability studies. He currently teaches at the University of Scranton in the Theology and Religion Department. His current book project is Mirra Alfassa, Mother and Child of the Divine of Tomorrow, which is the working title, which critically analyzes the role and influence of Mirra, aka the Mother, on the integral yoga that she and Sri Aurobindo co-created. The book evaluates Mirra's influence on Aurobindo's spiritual practice and teaching, and critically describes the nature of their relationship, intellectually and spiritually. It also focuses on how Sri Aurobindo influenced Mirra's teachings in Pondicherry, India, and how she developed their yoga tradition after his passing, and then explores her relevance today. Patrick is also a professional sacred sculptor with a studio at the Franciscan Monastery in Washington, D.C. His sculptures are in private and public collections across the USA. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you, Jonathan. And thank you to Devashish and the other planners. Can you hear me okay? Wonderful. I'm honored to be here. In fact, I'm sort of just recently over another, I was at another conference today and yesterday at Villanova, which was related to this one. It was on Teilhard de Chardin and Alfred Lord North Whitehead. And so it was a group of really Protestants and Catholics talking about many of the same issues that we're talking about here. And I was able to bring in some Dharma traditions, and it was a wonderful conversation. I'm hoping that in the future there'll be ways for some cross-pollinations. I found myself when I was writing this talk in between teaching that it changed, and I kind of focused on things that I didn't, I was going to talk about flowers and the mother, but that ended up not happening. But maybe in the Q&A we can talk about that a little bit. I mean, there's something related here. I really, in honor of the special man for whom the Bay Area is named, I wanted to bring in Francis of Assisi into the conversation with the integral vision of the Mother and Sri Aurobindo. The current leader of the over 1.3 billion Catholics in the world took the name of Francis of Assisi in 2013, and 2 years later published one of the most important religious documents of the 21st century, I would suggest, outlining his Franciscan vision for planet Earth. It was Pope Francis's second encyclical entitled Laudato Si, which means praise be to you, a line from Francis of Assisi's prayer called the Canticle of the Brother Sun. This encyclical is an urgent call to action for all human beings to transform every phase of our lives in relation to the planet. Pope Francis is due to share a follow-up document in the coming weeks that will give more guidance on this very topic. So how might we compare this Franciscan inspiration for this Catholic-led movement with the eco-spiritual vision of the integral yoga, specifically as taught and demonstrated by the mother of the Sri Aurobindo ashram? As I mentioned, Laudato Si is one of the first lines of Francis of Assisi's prayer in his Umbrian Italian dialect that praises the divine beloved manifesting through brother sun, sister moon, brother wind, sister water, brother fire, and sister mother earth, as he called her. I think it's helpful to notice that this wasn't a prayer to God for the sun, for the moon, and all of creation. I suggest it was a prayer to the divine as the sun, as the moon, as all of creation. In a rather surprising move, this prayer concludes with praise directly of the divine within and as the most material feature of matter, death itself, specifically bodily death. Beloved Francis says in his Italian, Laudato si mi Signore, per sola nostra morte corporale, dalle quale nullo homo vivente può scappare, which means, praise be to you, my Lord, for our sister bodily death, from whom no one living can escape. This, I think, recognizes the sacred nature and destiny of matter itself in its mortal nature, that the divine is not a supreme being isolated in a transcendent, impersonal prison of its own perfection, impassibility, and completion, but is personally involved in the painful growth of creation, such that all beings, and even death itself, are kin with one another in this shared divine life on the physical plane. Indeed, if we read Francis's prayer here through the evolutionary vision of Teilhard de Chardin of the 20th century, another Catholic, perfection is the very living dynamic of God, becoming more God through the family of creatures and through our conscious recognition of this fact as human beings, capable of consciously knowing itself as this universe in process of becoming more divine. Yet we human beings are, as Sri Aurobindo stated in many ways, we are transitional beings. For Aurobindo, we are not the center, but the leading edge of evolution, which means we are just like every being behind us on the evolutionary rung, under deconstruction, and will be overpassed for a new creation and a new post-human species that will manifest and is being manifested as we speak, the developing life divine in a completely new and as yet unimagined body that will have transformed its own mortality. So says Sri Aurobindo. So some traditions have it that Francis finished the final version of his canticle of Brother Sun with this last stanza in praise of bodily death, his sister bodily death, right before his own death on October 4th, 1226. Almost exactly 700 years later, Sri Aurobindo composed his epic poem Savitri, working on it from 1916 until the very last few weeks of his life in 1950. This matchless epic also praises the divine in all levels of creation, and even and especially as she manifests through the processes of death that are key to his and the mother's integral vision of planetary and cosmic transformation. In a set of pithy aphorisms, Sri Aurobindo gets to this point, and I just want to read a couple of them. He says, "This world was built by death, that he being death itself, might live. Wilt thou abolish death? Then life too will perish. Thou canst not abolish death, but thou mayst transform it into a greater living." He goes on to say the same of the oppositions of cruelty, ignorance, and error, that it is not by abolishing these obstacles, but by their transformation that the next stage of cosmic growth can be enacted. That cruelty is meant to not to be destroyed, but to be transfigured into what he calls a fierce love and delightfulness. And ignorance and error not to be abolished, but transmuted into what he calls the utter and effulgent exceeding of reason. He finishes with the next two aphorisms in this set. He says, "If life alone were, and not death, there could be no immortality. If love were alone and not cruelty, joy would be only a tepid and ephemeral rapture. If reason were alone and not ignorance, our highest attainment would not exceed a limited rationality and worldly wisdom. Death transformed becomes life that is immortality. Cruelty transfigured becomes love that is intolerable ecstasy. Ignorance transmuted becomes light that leaps beyond wisdom and knowledge, beyond wisdom and knowledge." For Sri Aurobindo, the building blocks of this universe are the very things the mind would rather avoid. If we stay within the mythos of Francis of Assisi's world, these aphorisms teach us that God created the Garden of Eden and its inner sanctuary where the tree of life stood as a temporary stage of growth and preparatory ecological home for all, not the goal or destiny of living creatures. The Lord planted a tree of the knowledge of good and evil with a serpent to ensure that Eden's tepid and ephemeral rapture and limited rationality and worldly wisdom would be surpassed. The mother commented on these aphorisms as well. She said that they simply give voice to a universal principle of growth. She says, it is the same idea, that is, opposition and contraries are a stimulus to progress. I want to read that again because I think that's important. She says, it is the same idea, that is, opposition and contraries are a stimulus to progress. Because to say that without cruelty, love would be tepid. The principle of love as it exists beyond the manifested and the non-manifested has nothing to do with either tepidness or cruelty. Only Sri Aurobindo's idea would seem to be that opposites are the quickest and most effective means of shaping matter so that it can intensify its manifestation. So it seems to me that the manifestation of this principle of love in matter is neither transcendent divine love, nor tepid natural love, nor unregenerate cruelty, but something else, a love that is ecstatic, perpetual, embodied, and has no opposite. For Mirra, these aphorisms describe her very physical experience of the descent of the supermind and a cruelty that accompanied her process, especially after February 29, 1956, when she saw and claimed to see, in the company of children, I think it is key to point out, the supermind beginning to manifest on the earth for the first time in creation, and then tracking its influence from that date until her death in 1973. Regardless of how a devotee might understand Mirra's spiritual status, as a saint who sees God face to face in creation and above it, as a Jivan Mukta who is identified with God yet retains the body, or as an avatara of the Divine Mother. Mirra said, resistance in the cells of her own physical body to the new supramental force automatically reacted against it. Her own preparation for this spiritual goal was lifelong, and yet she felt that, even in her case, the heavy substance of her body revolted, signaling what the Jivan Mukta Ramana Maharshi experienced, that the body is an incurable disease, impossible to transform, in his view. Mirra said that when first negotiating with this new supramental consciousness, she felt something similar. She said the first thing one feels is this kind of incapacity. Then comes an experience, something which manifests a form of, one cannot call it exactly cruelty because it's not cruelty as we know it, but within the totality of circumstances, a vibration appears and with a certain intensity refuses love as it is manifested here, unquote. But this material refusal seems automatic, having nothing to do with one's advanced state of consciousness or spiritual identity. Yet Mirra cautions that if one can stay with the cruelty and the refusal coming from the body instead of writing it off as chronic, the repudiation concurrently awakens a completely hidden longing within those very cells, a yearning to match the influx of spiritual consciousness of the divine. She said, quote, "It is an experience. I am speaking of something that has happened." So the part of the consciousness which has been struck by this opposition makes a direct appeal to the origin of love with an intensity which it would not have without the experience of this refusal. Limits are broken and a flood pours down, which could not have manifested before, and something is expressed which was not expressed before, unquote. So in other words, this intense appeal to love's origin comes from a surprising part of the being, the physical body itself, and its revolt. She further clarified the role of opposition in the form of death in this cellular process. She says, when one sees this, there's obviously a similar experience from the point of view of what we call life and death. It is this kind of constant brooding or presence of death and the possibility of death. As it is said in Savitri, we have a constant companion throughout the journey from cradle to grave. We are constantly accompanied by this threat or presence of death. Well, along with this, in the cells, there is a call for a power of eternity with an intensity which would not be there except for this constant threat. Well, this is a recognition of mortality that all great thinkers have described as being important for the development of civilization. From Sigmund Freud and Bronislaw Malinowski to those in the quasi-religious movements of transhumanism today, many have noted that the desire to master death anxiety has driven human beings since the legend of Gilgamesh to seek immortality. Jenny Huberman writes, "It has often been noted that to be human is not just to be mortal. All living creatures inevitably die. What makes our species so special and interesting, what makes us in large part human, is first that we live with an awareness that we are going to die. And second, that we also possess the capacity to overcome this inevitability through symbolic means. Throughout the history of our species, human beings have managed their knowledge and fear of death by attempting to achieve what the psychologists Robert Lifton and Eric Olson referred to as symbolic immortality." So Mirra recognized this universal experience of death anxiety, but further identified it within the cells of the body, and because of it, a profound desire for eternity exists within them, independent of the conscious mind and vital natures. I will leave to the side for how Mirra managed death anxiety with her students in their use of the arts and flowers, but that's a crucial thing to talk about that I don't have time to discuss. But what distinguishes her aspirations is her claim to be witnessing and creating not just a symbolic immortality, but an actual immortality of the body. Transhumanists also seek the same bold goal, flouting any notion of the inevitability of death. However, unlike transhumanists, Mirra's vision is meant to be achieved in the very cells and tissues of the flesh, not in avoiding their vulnerabilities through external and tenuous supports that technology, engineering, and/or chemicals might bring. Like Francis of Assisi, the mother also composed prayers. Many from the early part of her life, in fact, are gathered into a single volume of her collected works called Prayers and Meditations. To complete this presentation, I want to focus on a prayer that she said was composed through her. That is, she did not think it up with her mind. She composed the prayer in 1967 after the children of the ashram school came to her and requested a prayer that would really be the body's prayer, not the mind, not the vital, not the heart, but the body's alone. Just a little context. These children were training for what is called the December 2nd general demonstration of the physical culture in the ashram. And they wanted a prayer to recite at the end of the demonstration. And as an aside, I want to say that this event, this is an annual event, and it is so moving and so beautiful. I don't have words for it. I experienced this in 2012. It involves all the age groups of the ashram demonstrating the training and exercises and sports activities that they have mastered throughout the year, and offer this to the divine in their bodies, moving in individual and collective harmony and strength. Mother was so moved by this request from these children for a prayer of the body because it meant that the new consciousness she saw raining down on the earth since 1956 had been doing its work in these children. She told her colleague at the time there was a progress in this request. She says, "The body, you see, they've asked for a prayer of the body. They have finally understood that the body must begin to transform itself into something else. Previously, they were all full of the whole history of physical culture in every country. Anyway, it was the Olympic ideal. Now they have leaped beyond. That is the past. Now they want transformation. You understand, people were asking to be divine in their mind and vital. That is, the whole ancient history of spirituality, the same old theme for centuries. But now it's the body. It's the body that asks to participate. It's certainly a progress." The mother said this in light of her own experience. She said that for her, the mind has withdrawn, the vital has withdrawn, everything has withdrawn. When I was supposedly ill, the mind had gone away, the vital had gone away, and the body was left to itself purposely. I think that's really important. The body was left to itself purposely. And that's why it's precisely because the vital and mind had gone that it looked like a very serious illness. And if you read the Mother's Agenda, which is where I'm taking this from, which is our 13 volumes of the Mother's experience of supramental consciousness, it's really a series of her illnesses in many ways too. And then in the body left to itself, the cells little by little started awakening to the consciousness, started slowly emerging. It began with that burst of love from all the way up from that extreme, supreme altitude. Then little by little, it came down to the body. Then that sort of physical mind that is something totally and completely idiotic, going round and round in circles, forever repeating the same thing over and over again, cleared up little by little and grew conscious, organized, then fell silent. And then in that silence, the aspiration expressed itself in prayers. So Mother gave this prayer that she later called the prayer of the cells in the body. She says, now that by the effect of the grace, we are slowly emerging out of inconscience and waking up to the conscious life, an ardent prayer rises in us for more light, more consciousness. O Supreme Lord of the universe, we implore thee, give us the strength and the beauty, the harmonious perfection needed to be thy divine instruments upon earth. This moves me very much. It is impossible not to hear the peace prayer attributed to Francis of Assisi to become an instrument of the Lord's peace. We have here, I think, something, though, even more intimate than Francis's canticle of brother son. We have here not the human praise of the divine within matter or as matter. We have here matter itself, the cells themselves, in the body of this lady from France, directly beseeching the Lord of the universe, without a mental or vital mediator. As for the mother, this is our destiny, and it is the threat of death that will do the needful. The ecological crisis, global pandemic, social unrest, and the continual warring factions and frictions of nations intensify the call for supramental love. She said that if it can be done in her body, it can be done for all. She said it's contagious. That I know. And it's the only hope, because if everyone had to go through the same experience again, well, I'm 90 now. At the age of 90, people are tired. They've had enough of life. To do this work, one must feel as young as a small child. It takes a long time. I clearly see that it has taken a long time, and it isn't done. Of course, it's being done. It isn't done. Far from it. Far from it. What's the proportion of conscious cells? We don't know. But it is being done, and being done through the threat of death. And that might be a comfort for some. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Patrick. Okay, I'll monitor the question and answer. We have something coming in. John Robert is asking, any comments about the explosion of bodily therapies in the last 50 years?
I have to say, I'm not, that hasn't been a research focus of mine that I could answer that very closely. It seems to me, though, very much related. It can't, I can't imagine it wouldn't be. But I would imagine David Sheets would have more to say about this, maybe, or I'm not sure. But it seems to me, in terms of psychology and that sort of thing, it would mean that this explosion is a response to that. But I think of COVID. I mean, my thought is that we've all had this threat of death through COVID, and one might imagine the mother being very happy about COVID, as being a wonderful global stimulus to progress, to manifest something, something so terrible and crude is going to manifest, something so beautiful and wonderful. But that seems to be the process she's talking about. But so again, I'm sorry, I'm not answering the question there. But that's not my expertise that I could really answer that.
Well, I do remember, first of all, thank you. That was wonderful, although I was looking forward to your talk on mother and flowers, but that's okay. um, Let me see, in 1969, I was at Esalen, which was founded by Michael Murphy, of course, who was deeply influenced and calls himself sometimes certainly a follower of the mother and Sri Aurobindo. And I remember one phrase that I still use in my work: out of the mind and into the body.
Yeah.
That phrase was there already in the 60s. Maybe Michael had been influenced by the agenda already. I don't know. I don't think it was published by then, but that was very much at the forefront, at least in transpersonal work at Esalen. It was out of the mind and into the body.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can answer or talk to, I guess, being an artist, that's for me. I mean, I came to my spiritual practice through my hands and my body, and knowing the things that I know because of the creative process in my studio. And I don't know. And so really coming into the academic world has been a difficulty, has been to enter into what feels like a smaller space. But anyway.
Yeah, those cells, the prayers of the cells of the body, those few pages and are just, they're just
I mean, one could just
fantastic.
meditate on that.
Actually, I should have read those. No, I'm only kidding. Those are just, but they're great. They're fantastic.
Yeah.
Very interesting, though, of your comparison with Saint Francis, who, was a wonderful human being, and it was very beautiful to hear you talking about that also. Thank you.
I see we have two hands up too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Matt, would you like to jump in? One of our panelists.
I think I'll invite Debashish to go first.
Oh, thank you, Matt. Yeah, that was a wonderful talk, Patrick. I really got a lot out of that talk. It was so beautiful. Really, there's so much in it. But my question is, what you're saying about the place of adversity at a global level, which we are facing more and more with regard to sustainability. The sustainability, do the dangers of unsustainable disasters spur us to an aspiration that overcomes them? Is it inevitable, or may we, just like the mother said about the event of 1956 that she describes, just be completely oblivious of these forces and extinct ourselves? The mother says she thought this enormous cosmic event was happening, and she said that she felt she'd open her eyes and see everybody flat on the ground. But she opened her eyes and saw that nobody even knew what happened. So this is the question. Do we need somewhere? I mean, whether we're talking about the cells or we are talking about the vital, is there the necessity of a consolidation, a tapasya of the psychic at that level, without which we're just passive, flotsam that are doomed to extinction? Do we need something or do we not?
And when you say something, do you mean a practice, a method, a sadhana, or what do you mean?
I don't know, because like you said, what you're pointing out is very profound. I mean, does that sadhana have to be initiated by our conscious agency at some point, or does it initiate itself automatically, and can we expect that it'll ignite, as it were, automatically at some point? Or do we need to do, in other words, do we need to do anything about it? Or can we just expect that it'll happen? I mean, there are places where the mother goes in that second
Yes.
direction as well.
And
She
so
says,
did,
thank God we don't, we don't depend on humans. But
that's right. I sort of read her that way too. I sort of emphasize that part of her thoughts, and this is happening in our sleep. This is happening with that, whether we know it or not. That we are participating in it, whether we know it or not. And Meher Baba is doing the same thing. He's saying the same thing, that we are we're it's not going to be a destruction. It's not going to be an annihilation. It's going to be a transformation. But that the incredible suffering that we're going to have to endure is still there. But it will. So all I can say is I have faith in these gurus. But I can't say that I know, for instance, that we are going to come through this okay. I
know,
can't
but she
say
speaks to the contrary as well. She says, I know the supramental will come, but I can't say with that much guarantee that human beings will be the ones that will transform.
Right. I think this is why I think reincarnation and rebirth is so crucial. I mean, this is what was missing in the conversations I was having today and yesterday with our Christian brothers and sisters, that they don't have that frame. I think, or that understanding of growth, that this isn't, and Meher Baba talks about this too, this isn't the only earth, that if this earth is blown up, we will go to the next one that's being prepared. There is another earth. There are always other earths coming up. That doesn't mean we should be complacent. It just means that God has all of this guaranteed, but beyond our reckoning. But I think we need this. I think we need a hopeful vision to be stirred to do something, because we don't want to sort of say, oh, it's all bleak and it's there's no hope. I mean, I think, but it is to say, we have a threat of death here, and it is as existential and as huge as it's ever been, which means I think the complement is there underneath that says maybe we're ready for this transformation, because the threat is so big. There's maybe one way to look at it. I don't know, but I think your question is living and live, and I'm with you. I stand with you. I don't have the vision, the dristi to see what maybe Meher Baba or Sri Aurobindo, the mothers, see.
I do feel, though, Patrick, that just as you've described it, I mean, even to come to a vision of that urgency intensifies the aspiration at all levels, and perhaps that's a necessary step. And it may happen at any level. It may happen without the mind's consent, but I mean, I think it's only the hubris of the human that makes us feel that the mind has to take the leadership. It can happen at any level, I think, yeah, and in the body directly from the psychic. But yeah, thanks. It was a beautiful talk, I think.
Yeah, thank you, David.
I just wanted to ask one quick question, and that was, I'm reading this nice little book, In Service of the Wild, where Stephanie Mills goes to Oroville and sort of has these discussions, and she sort of calls Shakti the lead botanist of Oroville, which I thought was really nice, and also how the mother bestows epithets on 800 plants, calling sweet acacia supramental knowledge, naming integral wisdom for East India walnut, stability in the vital, joy of vegetal nature, and answer of the new light for bottle brush, and on and on. So I just, you had mentioned flowers, and I thought I'd just ask if you had any kind of things you'd like to leave us with that you couldn't in your presentation.
Oh, that's kind of you. Yeah, I think, I mean, I was going to kind of stress the mother's experience of the darkness for the growth of flowers and plants in general, that she emphasized that darkness was crucial for the stimulation of the aspiration for light in the plant, and that she would often, and I wrote about this in my dissertation, that she would often place her sawducks in the dark, much like a plant, in order to stimulate some aspiration within them for light. She said that, you know, she would often counsel her students to spend time with plants at night, so that one could feel their aspiration for the light, and in that way awaken their own psychic being and their own aspiration for light, that we want. And so plants have this sort of natural aspiration. They are aspiration in plant form, and we are meant to become like that. But we are meant to grow beyond the conventional beauty of the blossoms that we see, that we're meant to, and that the darkness is stimulating a supramental flowering, and that's awakening, you know, faculties of consciousness that will allow us to see and remember and to hear our true self, the one being that we all are, and become that, manifested in our bodies, so that our bodies become that. And so we blossom that new body. And I would have liked to have talked about that, and maybe talk about too her experience, that, and maybe she's talked about this too in other talks. Her experience with the cherry tree is so beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so crucial, I think, you know, and that's
Yes.
I think that's a, you know, wonderful sort of a pattern of, I think this is what we're all meant to experience. We're all meant to become, you know the blood of the sap of this tree within our blood, and to become one with it, and that there is no sort of hierarchy that we, you know, previous sorts of hierarchies. I don't know. There's different ways one could go with all of this, but I guess my main concern was, or interest at this time anyway, was to talk about the role of darkness to grow supramental growth, flowers and people and creation. The darkness is really crucial. I mean, we can't sort of, that there is a shadow side to love. There's a shadow side to God. There's a shadow side that really, I'm teaching the Bible right now to in a Catholic Jesuit school, and I'm seeing the shadow side of love all throughout the Old Testament, that God is, you know, he has this snake in the garden. He has this wicked quality that he sort of allows to happen. He hardens the heart of Pharaoh. I mean, all of these things are there. There's a shadow side that I think we're not integrating enough, and to our detriment, you know. And I think so. I guess all of these things are sort of in my mind and heart these days.